if you look back at any great ancient civilization, it was always felt that we were vessels for ideas and inspiration. They flowed through us. Now, depending on your belief system, it could come from a higher power, it could come from the people around us, our tribes, our communities that we're part of. In fact, even places have their own creative genius. The Romans called it the genius loci. And I think colleges and universities, at their best, have a genius loci about them. The role of many of the leaders in this room is going to have to change. It's going to move from where they're managing other people, they may be managing 10, 20, 50, 100 people, where they're going to be now managing both humans and AI agents that will in turn manage other AI agents. You can create a digital twin of your boss. Let's say if I'm going in to pitch for additional resources with that boss. I can say, okay, here's my draft presentation, my draft pitch. Imagine you are that boss. Critique it. What are the questions he or she is going to ask me? Where they're going to challenge me on different things? It means that when you go into that meeting, the conversation you're able to have, if you can work that into it, is at a much higher level.
In 1997, Garry Kasparov lost a chess match to IBM's Deep Blue. The easy story was that the machine had defeated the human. The age of human superiority in chess was over. But Kasparov saw something more interesting, and he asked a better question. What if the future of chess was not human versus machine, but human plus machine? That same question is now in front of higher education. AI is no longer a distant technology issue sitting somewhere in the future. It is moving into the daily work of our institutions, from finance to enrollment, advising, research, and student support. The real question is not how do we use AI, but how do we build a stronger partnership between human judgment and emerging technology? How do we use these tools without surrendering judgment? How do we increase efficiency without weakening trust across our teams? And most importantly, how do we stay curious enough to learn our way into a future we cannot fully predict? Howard Teibel sat down with James Taylor, global keynote speaker, former music industry executive, and one of the leading voices on creativity and artificial intelligence at the Wakubo annual meeting in Las Vegas. James offers a powerful reframing for higher education leaders. The future will not belong to those who simply adopt new tools. It will belong to those who know how to orchestrate new relationships between people and technology. At a time when colleges and universities are once again being asked to do more with less, AI can feel either like a threat or a shortcut. James and Howard invite you to see it as something else, a catalyst for learning. And now, Howard Teibel with James Taylor.
Thank you, Pete. James, it's great to be with you in person here at Wakubo.
Well, it's lovely being here. Always wonderful being in Las Vegas as well.
You're talking about AI. Your work is in that space. And you and I had a brief conversation yesterday. So I found some of your writing. Mm-hmm. I went on ChatGPT, and I did a psychometric on you. James Taylor comes from a high openness, future-focused, conceptually agile, emotionally assuring, innovation-oriented communicator. His talk is designed to help leaders move from uncertainty to agency by reframing AI as a partner in creativity rather than a replacement for human judgment. For a Wakubo audience, the most relevant psychometric theme is Taylor's work invites business officers to shift from operational expertise alone to creative orchestration. How close is that?
I think I was very close. And the word I think that was striking out to me there was openness. You know, that And I think this is in my work around creativity. It's one of the main traits you tend to see in people that are very creative in their work is this sense of openness, their willingness to be able to question, to learn, to unlearn and relearn.
So let's step back. Tell us a little bit how you got to where you are today.
So I started in a very different industry. I started in the music industry. So I used to manage rock stars. That was my old job. So for the first...
Anyone we might know?
Yeah, so I worked with members of the Rolling Stones, a lot of Grammy Award winners, in all different styles, jazz, pop, opera, classical. And then in about 2010, I got this request to move to Silicon Valley to work in tech. And at that point, I don't know if you remember, things like Spotify was just going to be probably a bit starting at that time, but the music industry was in a funny place. And so I thought, let's just change things up. So I moved to California, and my wife and I got heavily, deeply involved in tech, artificial intelligence, and then I was speaking at an event one day in San Francisco, and someone came up to me and said, you realize you can do this for a living, you can speak for a living. I'm like, really? How does that work? So today I deliver between 50 to 100 keynotes a year, 25 plus countries for many of the global Fortune 500 companies, and this is kind of what I do, and I speak on creativity, innovation, and artificial intelligence.
I'm sure there are some consistent themes that you share wherever you go, because this is a phenomenon that no matter what industry you're in, this is relevant.
Yeah.
And the work we do is primarily with education institutions that are now looking at this, and they've got, in some cases, this FOMO, like, should we be doing this?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about some core themes that you really think people should be thinking about, that you talk about where you go.
Well, one of the things I'll be talking about here is, and this is not just me saying this, it's based upon research by Boston Consulting Group and lots of other organizations, is if you look at why most organizations fail in deploying AI, regardless of industry, only 20% of it is the technology itself, the large language models, the tools that they're using. 80% of the reason these initiatives fail is because of people, processes, playbooks, things that are running in their heads. So what I'm going to be speaking about here in Wakubo is, yes, I'll be talking about the technology and all the amazing things that are going on, and just taking people a little bit into the future. Also, what organizations are doing just now that are really working on the edges of using AI. But also to bring it back to the cultural piece and to the human side. And that's where I tend to find that my message resonates with a lot of people, because it blends that human and the technology, the human and machine side.
One of the things as I was reading some of your writing and thinking, you talk about being an orchestrator. Yeah. Can you say more about orchestration? Yeah,
so because with the period that we're going into just now, and I have to remind this to audiences, because you mentioned that word FOMO. AI has been around since 1956. It's not new. The concept is not very new. We had machine learning, deep learning, and then the big change that happened was about 2017, 18, large language models, things like ChatGPT. We're now moving into this period called agentic AI, or AI agents. That is fundamentally different in a number of different aspects. One is that these AI agents have much higher levels of autonomy than previous generations of AI. They can have access to other tools. They can use websites, APIs, IoT sensors, and they have much better levels of prioritization and planning. So the thing I describe, and I'll be describing this in the talk, is that the role of many of the leaders in this room is going to have to change. It's going to move from where they're managing other people, they may be managing 10, 20, 50, 100 people, where they're going to be now managing both humans and AI agents that will in turn manage other AI agents. So the example that I give, and there's different ways that you can work with this, and one of the examples I give is a report that came out about a year ago. Talk about these two main ways that we're seeing people working with technologies like AI. One is what we call a cyborg way of working, where simply an individual is intertwining everything that they do with AI, constantly refining and molding its responses. It's like if you see a guitarist, that guitar almost becomes part of who they are, becomes an extension of themselves. Then the other side is a centaur, and that's probably more for this audience here. So a centaur is really this idea that as an individual, you look at a project or a piece of work and you're able to say, these are things that the AIs are going to do, and these are things that myself and my human team will reserve and will do. Whether you decide to be a cyborg or a centaur in your work doesn't really matter. The point is you start to augment. So where it's going to move to is this idea that we will become like a classical conductor. You're conducting this orchestra. Some of them will be humans, some of your team will be AI agents. If you look at a company like McKinsey, for example, they have 25,000 human employees, but they also have 35,000 AI agents now. So for that manager, and this is the good thing, is that if you're a good manager of people, studies show that you're very likely to be a good manager of AI agents as well.
Recently, I was in this promo, and the social media person within 10 minutes created this video, this music video of all of us. And there's a place that concerns me about what happens for people who have made a living creatively, photographers, musicians. I love this principle that you're bringing, which is this is about augmenting what we do, that we're orchestrating a bigger conversation. But what do you say to folks who are concerned about this link between their imagination and creativity and the technology? I have concerns about us losing a certain agency in the creative space.
Yeah, so there's a couple of levels on that one. One is actually, are the people who created the information that trained the AI, are they being recompensed? Let's say in music, for example. I can go to a tool like Suno or an Udio and say, I want a song in the style of Elvis, but singing about this thing here, and it will produce that. Is Elvis's estate being recompensed by that? Are any of the musicians that the recording sounds a little bit like, are they being recompensed? So there's that part of it, which kind of goes to the ethics side of AI. When it comes to what you're talking about is something that you were seeing a little bit in medicine and in healthcare just now. The best way I can describe it is it's like a skill atrophy that's going on. So you see it in one of my clients is Medtronic, who make robotic surgical equipment, and what they notice is a lot of surgeons, some surgeons becoming a little bit overly reliant on some of these tools in some ways, and their own human skills become a little bit atrophied after a while. Once you point that out to people, then they can think, oh, I'm going to figure out how to remedy this as well. So I think the good news, though, I think about more broadly, is it will democratize, let's say, music creativity. It will democratize music making. I can go and create something, an orchestral piece now, and I'm not a creator in that way. So that it definitely democratizes, but there is a big difference between getting something out there into the world, which is like, oh, that's good, to being truly world class. That is a different level. That requires a sense of taste, a sense of touch, and bringing back to something very physical. If you go to the Lexus factory in Aichi, Japan, they have these people called takumis. A takumi is someone in America who have the 10,000-hour rule. Someone that's done 10,000 hours in their job. A takumi is someone that's done 40,000 hours in their chosen profession. So these are usually very, very skilled, very experienced people. And what they have is, even though these cars are primarily being made on production lines by robots, at the end of the production line, you have these people standing there called takumis with white gloves on, and they're touching and they're feeling the guitar, and they're spotting errors that the machines cannot spot. They have a sense of taste, a sense of touch. For us, probably in the work that we do, we have a sense of gut feel. We have that gut, that doesn't sound quite right. That doesn't look quite right. And that's something you only can really develop with experience. You
said to me yesterday something that I really appreciated about the nature of coming together as human beings, and that in some ways there's going to be an increasing desire to have this face-to-face contact while this technology continues to improve. Say a little bit about what you're discovering and talking with people about the nature of sort of becoming additionally isolated and be able to sit on our phones and not connecting with each other, and why this is going to be increasingly important, what you're going to be talking about tomorrow even. Yeah, I think when Steve Jobs created the iPhone, I genuinely believe, I did an event the other day with Steve Wozniak, who's the co-founder of Apple, and Jobs and Wozniak, they created these devices as tools of creation, but they're really now primarily tools of consumption. And so we kind of have to
think about that, about how we deal with some of these tools. So I think it's difficult, because as we kind of use these tools more and more, I think we're going to have to figure out how we want to use them. I think it's going to make us have to reflect on what is the competitive advantage, let's say, of humans. So coming back to the in real life, the IRL, why I think events like this are so important is because everything can be faked now, and we have deep fakes. We see it all the time, and politicians are having deep fakes made of them. People are making deep. So this is just, and I say this also to many people here that work with at universities and colleges where you have generations coming in. They are, in some ways, they're the first generation that they can't really trust anything. So coming together, and this is, I've seen this, I've been having a conversation with a number of events companies recently where they're seeing a move towards a more festivalization of events, where an event, whether it's a conference, whatever the event, an internal event, is not about delivering content. It's about bringing people together, bringing a sense of community. And actually, I think about something like this. We've been doing this kind of thing, like, you could argue, for thousands of years. 2,500 years ago, you had something called symposiums. Ancient Greeks, where you'd sit around, people debate, discuss, challenge ideas. The word symposium just comes from a Greek word which means to drink together, because the Greeks knew a little bit of wine was quite conducive to the creative process. So people, when they're having some cocktails here in Las Vegas, they're in symposium. So what that does, though, is so many ideas, they do require proximity. You do need a little bit of what we call creative abrasion, where people and things need to rub up against each other. Sometimes that can be quite, your work, you have difficult conversations. Sometimes you need those difficult conversations for creative things to come out of them. If you don't have that, then we've all probably been in places and organizations we've seen where things are going along, okay, fine. But there's nothing truly creative or innovative that's coming from that organization.
What you're saying is so much more relevant for higher ed, because the future professor is one who is able to bring people together to have the right conversations.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to continue to hold on to individuals have all the knowledge. The knowledge is not really living anymore in the individuals, because it's also changing so fast.
Yeah.
So this principle of a festival, this principle of people convening people to be able to be in conversations, is a shift away from what we think our value is. Because I think most of us, as we get older, we hone in on our expertise. My feeling is it's so much more about the capacity to how you can engage and guide people.
Yeah, I think that thing, that's quite a modern notion, modernish. We had someone this morning talking in terms of the Native American tribes here. And if you look back at any great ancient civilization, it was always felt that we were vessels for ideas and inspiration. They flowed through us. Now, depending on your belief system, it could come from a higher power, it could come from the people around us, our tribes, our communities that we're part of. In fact, even places have their own creative genius. The Romans called it the genius loci. And I think colleges and universities, at their best, have a genius loci about them. And there's a lot of thought that's been going into this just now. And we go back this idea that this, talking about the individual piece, that really came about in the Renaissance. Giorgio Vasari, the artist, wrote a book called Lives of the Artists. He was the first person to say, Leonardo and Michelangelo is the creative genius. If you look at before that, it was always felt we were creative genius. And I think that shift is now moving from recognizing that genius doesn't just exist within individuals. You have what we call genius, almost a collection of people, a grouping of people have their own genius. We call it genius. And so something like this, and that's the value of coming to in-person events, is you have a sense of that genius. You have a sense of people are coming together, debating ideas, discussing ideas, and it goes way beyond just the individual. That's the power of the community.
What's a practice that you would suggest to leaders to create what I think you talk about as a super creative team, right? One that blends what I would call human judgment, collaboration, and intelligent machines. Like, what can they do to start moving in that direction? to create those kind of teams?
Well, here's a very practical one, and I'm seeing this happen a lot just now within organizations. I was just in Atlanta, and I was talking to someone from Siemens, the German engineering company, and what he described to me is something I'm seeing quite a lot of people do, and I think this is very useful for people in this world, business officers and administrators, is something you can do in any of the tools, Copilot, ChatGPT, doesn't matter. You can create a digital twin of your boss. So you just need to feed it a little bit of information about who your boss is, maybe some email correspondence you've had, maybe some documents that they've written. Like you did right at the start there, it gets a sense of that. And then let's say if I'm going in to pitch for additional resources with that boss, I can say, okay, here's my draft presentation, my draft pitch. Imagine you are that boss, critique it. What are the questions he or she is going to ask me? Where they're going to challenge me on different things? It means that when you go into that meeting, the conversation you're able to have, if you can work that into it, is at a much higher level. And this is the bit about the elevation and the augmentation of humans. It's not just about replacing those things. It's about really kind of elevating, because you can get right to the nub of the matter much earlier in the conversation and said, listen, I know this is going to be one of your key concerns about this, so let me tell you how I've thought about how you can resolve that.
I'd be a little afraid to figure out what my team would find out about me if I created a twin.
Yeah.
I actually might learn something about myself.
Maybe.
The perception out there.
Maybe.
What are you having fun with around this topic? Because it's so emerging, it's changing every day. You're at the sort of leading edge and thinking about it a certain way. What about this jazzes you?
Yeah, it's a fascinating area. It is moving so fast, and one of the joys of what I get to do is, because I speak in so many different countries and so many different industries, I see what's going on. And maybe it's almost I have a little bit of a look into the future with some organizations a little bit further ahead than other industries. One of the ones that came out, which is, I think is very an interesting thing to think about now, is the one-person billion-dollar business. So because it just happened about 2 months ago, a gentleman, Peter Steinberger, an entrepreneur from Austria, he started a business in October last year, and it was basically it was building an AI agents to be able to build this business. And in the space of 4 months, he built a business and sold it for an estimated $10 billion. That is a one-person, multi-billion-dollar business created in just 4 months.
I think in the New York Times.
Yeah, there was another one that happened in the New York Times after, which was actually a little bit. It wasn't true entirely. What it was
that's a great
selling
example.
GLP-1s. It wasn't true. It was this. Yeah, and there's a whole story. I won't kind of go into the details of that one, but the general trend is this idea of moving of one-person billion-dollar businesses. And the reason I think it's interesting more from the work of institutions, organizations, corporations, is you're not necessarily going to be building a one-person billion-dollar company, but it does make you think, how could I run this organization much more efficiently than I have in the past by using AI agents? How can we, and this is a thing that's happening at the moment, and you're feeling it and you're seeing it in quarterly reports by companies. Some companies are just going straight for the lever that says, let's fire 3,000 people. Other companies are saying, no. IKEA, for example, is a good example. They had an opportunity, they could lay off 8,500 people because they brought in a new AI agent to replace a particular customer service role. Instead, they upskilled and redeployed those people, and they built an entirely new part of the business with those people that generated $1.3 billion last year alone.
You're recognizing the limitations, but you're also pointing out, in a way, like how this can really augment and improve our futures.
Yeah.
We could talk forever about some of the risks and the downsides, but what you're doing is, I think, offering something to folks to give them some hope that they can engage in this. Because I think I've discovered, so we do an AI, we invite people to do some research on culture, and we still hear people saying, I have never even tried it. There's still a fear that by engaging in it, somehow they're going to end up getting closer to feeling like they're obsolete. Yeah. So finding a way to do this that is not intimidating, that to me is the key.
And I just think, just get started, play with it, go into it in a mode of being playful. a playfulness. I was talking to someone last night, and he said he just went into it. He hadn't really used any of these tools before. He had one particular thing. He had a big data set he was trying to figure out and what to do with it. And over the course of 3 days, he said, I got the work back that a PhD student would have struggled to produce that level of work. And he said a light bulb went on for him. I thought, wow, if I can do this just with a very basic understanding, what can I do if I really lean into it a little bit more? How can this improve my life, the work I do? How can it improve the lives of the people that my work touches?
Thank you so much for bringing this, and really excited about what you're going to be sharing with us tomorrow.
It'll be my great pleasure. Thank you.